that I don't see sitting in here that I Willis. I had the good fortune of teaching him back in the 8th grade. So back in the early 90s. So he is a Marshall County High School graduate. He has experience in so many areas of broadcasting, and he's worked himself up literally from the bottom. And obviously too, he has connections with people in high places. And so we wanted to give him an opportunity to talk to you all. Y'all can ask questions, kind of learn from him, you know, what's going on in this field, right? So we'll turn it over to Mr. Willis.
All right. Well, morning. Morning. Really appreciate being here today. Go on in. You're good. I don't stand behind podiums well. I kind of pace when I talk. So I'll give you guys a little bit of background on me. I'll leave you a little background on me, and then tell you a little bit about my field. And if you have interest in being a part of something like sports broadcasting, I'll tell you first and foremost, it's a great job. It's never the same 2 days in a row. So if you ever get tired, and I know a lot of you at this age are probably tired of sitting at a desk and feel like you're doing the same thing over and over again, if you're in sports broadcasting, I'd say rarely are 2 days alike. So as was mentioned, I graduated from Marshall County High in 1997. I was here the first year this building was made, and so when I graduated, I went to Columbia State for 2 years because I did not know what I wanted to do with my life at that point. Matter of fact, I thought I was going to get into computer programming because I love technology. But I went 2 years to Columbia State, and during that time, started to work for WJJM here in Lewisburg. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but WJJM is a radio station, AM, FM station here in town that, has been here since the early 1950s. I went to work for them because I thought it was something that I could do and do well. Went and did a little audition. They told me they didn't have any jobs available, and so they said, take this recorder, go read the news, and we'll listen to it, and we'll tell you if we got anything for you. And they called me 2 days later and said, why don't you come up here and let's see what we can do. So I was blessed or lucky, however you want to look at it, that I kind of walked in right place, right time, and jumped right into an opportunity. So a couple of years working at WJJM really kind of taught me that I wanted to be in broadcasting. So I went to MTSU for my last 2 years, 2.5 years in Murfreesboro. And MTSU, if you're not familiar, has a really excellent broadcasting program. Not just a class load, but just the opportunities and things that you can do, different ways that you can volunteer. They have a great student-led station. They have great classes where you're actually able to get some hands-on experience, which in this business is everything. I say that because if I get 10 resumes and 9 of them have a degree and 1 of them has the most experience, I'm probably talking to the person who has the most experience first, just because it's one of those kinds of industries, right? So I was at MTSU for 2 years, and when I was just about to finish, I was kind of in charge of inputting internships in our database at school. We had an internship come across for the Titans radio network. At that point, Titans Radio was only a couple of years old because the Titans hadn't started as an organization, at least under that name, until 1999. And so filled out an application and sent that in. And because of my experience working in a radio station, be it a local radio station, WJJM.
I need the following students to report to the office immediately. Natalie Arzate Mendez, Andrew Davenport, Hendrick Capio, and Emily Staggs.
So took an internship with the Titans Radio Network in 2001, worked for a season with them, and then was offered a full-time job with them in early 2002. So I've been part of the Titans radio broadcast team now for 22 years, during which time I've been to every NFL city except for the teams that have moved. I haven't been to Las Vegas yet, where the Raiders play now, but I've been to every stadium in the league covering the Titans, both home and away. I've gotten to work with Mike Keith, who, if you're not familiar with Mike's a Franklin, Tennessee native, Ended up going to school at UT Knoxville, was a sportscaster in Knoxville, and became the voice of the Titans in 1999. He's called every game for the Titans since their inception. Been lucky enough to work with former pro athletes, former head coaches, and everybody's style is a little bit different. So obviously with this group, you know, if I hear that you're interested in sports broadcasting, by show of hands, how many would say that's the case? You're interested in maybe getting into that field a little bit. Okay, good number of you, right? How many of you play sports right now? Okay, another good number of you. All right, well, here's the good news, right? You can play sports and have a really good base about the sport you're going to cover, right? I know a lot of people who are really good broadcasters who never laced up a pair of cleats or put on a pair of pads. They're really good broadcasters. So, and then there's a lot of people in sports broadcasting who are totally behind the scenes and never crack a mic. You never hear them. People like Steve Early and Glenn Thaxton with the Vol Network. Those are two guys that I think of who have been with that organization forever. You never hear them on the radio, but they're doing all the legwork behind the scenes to kind of make it happen. We've got people like that with the Titans Network. Our on-site engineer is a guy named Philip Noel. We never hear him on the air, but he's been our game day engineer since 2008, and it's just kind of a side hustle for him. He's the director of 911 for Bedford County. It's his day job. So it's we've got a group of about 6 that kind of travel throughout. So I asked a question about, you know, like who wants to be a sportscaster, or maybe who's playing a sport, because I think a lot of times the question is how do you get there, right? Show of hands, how many of you are seniors? Okay, same seniors. How many of you have something picked out after school, either a college or a major or anything like that? Right? Okay. Well, you don't have to. There's no pressure. I didn't have a plan when I graduated high school necessarily, except that I wanted to go to a 2-year or a 4-year college, and I did both. But if you are interested in sports broadcasting, I tell you right now, you need to figure out at some point whether you're any good at it. Now, will you be good at it tomorrow? No. No. If I went back and played you tapes from where I, started out, I'd be embarrassed to let you hear them. I would not play it. I would probably have to leave the room for you to listen to it. Because just like with playing sports, you're only going to get better with reps, right? Because if you're a center fielder, that first fly ball is hard to judge, right? And over time, it starts to get a little bit easier. You start to build up muscle memory. You start to build up the skills that you need. Broadcasting is no different. So people ask all the time, well, how can I do that? Because broadcasting in general is a hard field to get into. And I'll give you a really good reason why. How many people we have? Let's say we have 25 people in here, right? Let's say you all wanted to be an NFL play-by-play person. There's only 32 jobs to be had, okay? There's only 32. Now, there's also 32 game day engineers, there's 32 color analysts, there's 32 spotters, there's 32 statisticians, there's all these other jobs, that are in sports broadcasting, but aren't necessarily on the air or doing play-by-play. And that's something I've told myself a lot of times. If I ever get kind of jaded to the idea of how the day is going, you kind of stop and say, hey, there's only 32 people doing this job today, so appreciate it, right? Know that there'd probably be a line out the door to take my job if I didn't want to do it that day. And some days are like that. But how do you get those reps, especially if nobody's hiring, right? You do a lot of things. And I had a friend of mine who was a writer once, and he said, if you want to be a writer, you write something every day. Whether or not anybody reads it, you sit down and you type something up every day. Put it in a folder, you go back to it later, you read it, and decide, is that any good? Can I get any better? What would I do different? How would you edit yourself differently? Well, I believe sports broadcasting is the same way. Because if you want to be a play-by-play analyst or play-by-play host, or if you just want to be a talk show host, you got to figure out a few things. You got to figure out how you sound. You got to figure out your style. You got to figure out your personality. You got to figure out if you can talk for an hour straight. And there's a lot to be said for that. But I'd say put that on tape. Don't just do it in the mirror. Take out your phone, record it, give it a little time, come back to it the next day, listen to it in the car when you drive to school, and say, is it any good, right? Because you're ultimately going to have to decide what you sound like. You know, some people have, you know, a gift of gab, and some people, you know, have to kind of work on it a little bit. But you can work on those kinds of things, especially from a standpoint of, you know, sports broadcasting. In a lot of ways, if you take the sports out of it, is what our job is to do is to entertain people. So you have to decide how are you entertaining. That sometimes is through storytelling. That sometimes is just through painting the picture of what you see on the field. Because I'll tell you guys right now, I'm as radio gets. I spent my entire adult career in radio. But I told somebody not long ago, I got a really hard time if we're in Philadelphia and we get off the bus and it's college football Saturday, not pulling my phone out and watching the game on my phone, right? But the thing that I tell people too all the time is, you know, for a Titans game on a Sunday, when was the last time you had 3 or 4 hours to sit still on a Sunday? You didn't have anything to do, right? Especially if you're a dad like me, you got a kid with ball practice, or you got to go run and do something or whatever. Well, you know, our goal is we're painting a picture over the radio for people who are kind of in transit, and we've gotten just a great place. And Tennessee, historically, has had really good play-by-play announcers. John Ward at the University of Tennessee is one that's just Hall of Fame level announcer, and people in this region were taught very early on to turn down the television, turn up the radio, and listen to the guy calling the game who knows your team. So we've got that benefit to a large degree. I say all that to say it will take work to get into a field like this, and you want to make sure you set yourself up well. I'll also say that I hired people to work for me. I ran the Titans flagship station for 13 years. And I hired people to work for me whose background was not in broadcasting. I hired a guy that was a lawyer who wanted to do sports broadcasting. I hired people that had sold cars that wanted to do sports broadcasting because they were a good fit, and because they had a good personality, and because they were marketable. And that's the thing you have to ask yourself when you put yourself on tape. Am I marketable? Am I memorable? How are you different? You know, how are you different than the guy or girl sitting next to you who will tell me what's happening on the field in the similar words, right? So those are the kinds of things that you have to kind of start to work on. We also want you to understand the odds that it requires to make it. Because I went to school at MTSU, graduated in 2001 with a class full of people who were very bright, very talented, and lots of them did not get an opportunity right out of school. And that's where broadcasting is a bit of a headache, because it is oftentimes right place, right time, and who can you make a connection with that will help you get that foot in the door. Well, I was lucky because of my internship. I had an immediate foot in the door. I had a lot of people I went to school with who didn't have that luxury, and so I tell people all the time, understand the odds. For example, Mike Keith, who I mentioned, who's the voice of the Titans, didn't get that job until he was 31 years old. So in the 10, 12 years that he was out of college before he was given, you know, what a lot of people would look at as a dream job, you know, he did any number of things. He called high school football, you know, he called baseball, you know, he worked for the Vol Network as a grunt. He was a guy that was just behind the scenes, just doing whatever needed to be done. And during that time, that's where he made his connections. That's where he made his opportunities. So when, you know, the NFL finally comes to Nashville, Tennessee, and they're looking for a play-by-play announcer, he was the guy that got the look. Now, he got it 31 years old. He's done the job ever since. So that tells you there's not a lot of turnover in those jobs either, especially with a play-by-play announcer who's oftentimes the identity of a team, you know, both on television and radio and all these other shows. They find somebody that works well, they're going to be there for a long time. Why do I say all that? Well, I say all of it to not get discouraged and to look at, you know, real situations, because like I said, I went to school with a lot of people who made it 25, 26 years old, and they said, this is never going to happen. You know, I'm not going to make it. And so
I need J.C. Brady, Omar Garcia, Aiden Rabiz, Kendrick Hernandez, Lyle Nelson. Those students come to the office, please.
I have a question, Bobby.
Yep.
Well, as you said, practice and not and recording yourself.
Yep.
do with the newer things like podcasts and things like that, if kids just started making some YouTube videos and doing some things, is that a great way to,
Absolutely.
would you, okay.
It's reps. It's anything you can do to put yourself out there, to either be able to show it to somebody for proof of performance, what you can do, or just to self-critique and get better. And now, you know, in '97 we didn't have this luxury. Now you've got the ability to do all that in your pocket, right? I mean, you can just set it up on a tripod and record yourself talking, lay in some graphics, and you got yourself a YouTube show. Doesn't take a lot of expense, doesn't take a lot of hassle, and you may post it and immediately want to wipe that thing once you watch it, but you got that luxury too. But the good news is that, you know, if you want to build houses, you got to go build a house. You know, you got to get some wood and nails and foundation and start working. Well, this is something you could literally do in your bedroom and come back to it 2 days later and go, okay, you know, that's something I can work on. You can watch a game and call it. Turn the TV down. Just call the game. Call the play-by-play, and then go back and listen to it and ask yourself, if I couldn't see this, am I painting a proper picture for people? Am I doing the things? And I'll say this, and just so you guys know, I've been in sports broadcasting for like, you know, like I said, somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 years if you count WJJM. In those 25 years, you want to know how many ball games I've called on the radio? 2. Both of them were Marshall County basketball games. Because my entire life has been spent in the background, and I'm totally good with that. Because in the 22 years that I've spent, I've been an engineer, a statistician, a spotter. I've essentially worn every hat that you can wear in a broadcast booth without calling the games. And I tell you as somebody that would tell you straight up, like, I don't know that I have the talent level to call a game. Now, I can host a pregame show, and I can host halftime and postgame, which I've done. But calling a game, we always worry, especially when we were in the midst of COVID. It's like, what happens if our play-by-play guy gets COVID 2 days before the game? What are we supposed to do? I don't know that we ever figured that out. But I think I said there was a smaller group in here at the beginning. And one of the things that I think is important, especially if you're thinking about getting into play-by-play, is understanding the amount of prep work that goes into it. You know, I said earlier that you know, your goal is to be entertaining. And if you're going to call baseball, and you can speak to this, there's a lot of downtime between pitches, right? So if all you're calling are balls and strikes, you've got a lot of what we call dead air. And people don't like to listen to dead air. But a really good play-by-play host or play-by-play person is going to spend tons of time going into every game looking for every human interest story, any statistical trend, anything that they can have to make sure that they're telling you a proper story. I'll give you a couple of examples. We were in Indianapolis a couple of years ago. The Titans blocked a field goal, returned it for a touchdown. Play-by-play guys on my right, we're 8 stories up at Lucas Oil Stadium, so the field's kind of playing out. Ball gets blocked, player runs it all the way down to the end zone. You know, play-by-play announcer, you know, yells touchdown Titans, and he turns, and on the wall, he's got a list. It was the last time anything of note happened, and he's got on there the last time the Titans blocked a field goal for a touchdown was, and he said, without missing a beat, that's the first since this date. Immediately. Well, he doesn't pull that number out of his hat, you know. That number is prep. And he went home that day and he took that spreadsheet and he deleted it, and it said, last time the Titans blocked a field goal was this person against Indianapolis on this date. So he's up to date still. I sit next to him on the airplane and watch him work on a sheet of paper that's nothing but numbers. And on our flight to whatever city we're going to, he takes that list of numbers and he just writes people's names beside it. He's just doing recall. He wants to know that, you know, number 7 for the Houston Texans is C.J. Stroud, or whatever the case may be. He's trying to do it so that when the time comes and he sees a number, it's kind of burned into his brain as to who the player is. The other thing I'll tell you, and I know a lot of people won't like to hear this, but you got to know a little bit of math if you're going to do play-by-play. Because Derrick Henry has 68 yards rushing, and you really want to make a big deal when he hits 100, Well, if he busts one off for 35, you better know real quick, yeah, he just hit 100. If he busts one off for 28, you go, he's still a bit short. But you got to figure that in your head while it's all on the fly. You also have to figure sometimes if a run starts at 26 and ends at 34 on the other side of the field, and you want to tell somebody on the radio how many yards they did, you've got to have an idea of yardage and distance and all those kinds of things. And quick math doesn't hurt you there. I use math way more than I want to, and oftentimes I'll have to actually scribble it out before I tell my play-by-play guy how many yards somebody ran. I serve as his spotter on game day. So I sit between our play-by-play man and our color analyst with a pair of binoculars, and I'm watching for defensive numbers. So guy comes in, sacks the quarterback. I want to tell my play-by-play announcer it was number 54. He's calling his own offense. He knows who has the ball. He knows who's throwing it. He knows who's catching it. He's telling that story, and then he says, tackle made by, and he's going to look down, and my hand's going to be on a number and a name, and he then knows, okay, 54 made the tackle. But in that role, I'm watching for a lot of other things too. You know, we're doing a broadcast which is sponsored, right? So we get inside the 20. We want to make sure that we mention that the Titans are in the Pinnacle scoring zone. All right, that's a reader that we have to do that's sponsored by Pinnacle Bank. So I'm watching for we getting inside the 20. Is he going to remember, or am I going to have to tell him? Well, sometimes I tell him, I'll just point the wall. It's your Pinnacle reader. We get only a certain number of commercial breaks. If you watch an NFL game, they take 4 breaks a quarter and 1 break at the end. If you miss it, they don't make it up for you. So I'm watching, there's a guy, and if you want to watch for him, you can. There's a guy who's on the home sideline at the 30-yard line in every game. He's wearing what looks like 2 oven mitts that are hunting colored orange. He's the guy that will walk out on the field. If he crosses his arms, they're taking a break. If he doesn't do anything, you just keep playing. And so I'm watching that. I'm watching officials. I'm watching for flags. I'm watching for players who get hurt who might go to the locker room. Because again, if you're a play-by-play guy, you've only got one set of eyes, right? And so you definitely want to have people who are there who are kind of giving you some hints. And and again, that goes into, when you're talking about sports broadcasting, it goes into kind of all of those parts. How long is Tiger Time? How long?
You've got about 8 more minutes.
Okay.
You might want to open it up.
I was going to say, I'd love to, if anybody has any questions.
You're getting it good.
Yeah, I'd love to answer anything you guys have, because like I said, there's probably plenty that I can answer that I haven't thought of. Anybody got one? Yes, sir.
How would you go about doing your research for like the other teams and how to call out stuff for them?
Yeah, so a lot of it's just digging through sports writers' columns. You go, say you're playing Pittsburgh Steelers, you want to go to the Pittsburgh newspaper and check out their sports columnist. What are they writing about? You can do a deep dive on stats. If you're working with a team, oftentimes you'll have access to kind of next level statistics, trends, all those kinds of things that you can log in and look for. If there's a specific player who's injured, a lot of that comes down to connections too. Our play-by-play guy will pick up the phone and call his counterpart in Philadelphia or in Atlanta and say, hey, I noticed that they benched the quarterback last week. Is he hurt? Is that performance related? All those kinds of things. So anywhere you can get information, it's good information. You seek it out and kind of make your notes based on it. And a lot of people will make spotter charts with the entire lineup, and then we'll make little notes out beside them. Some people will make spreadsheets. Whatever is best for them to access in real time, or to access where they prep and get ahead. It's kind of to each their own. Whatever your style is, whatever works best for you, you can do it. But there's plenty of avenues out there to find that information, especially on professional level. Good question. Yes, sir.
The NFL's doing the new next gen stats.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something y'all are handling, or is that a completely different thing?
That's a great question. So, a lot of what's happening right now is that the league is trying out a lot of things. The players all have GPS monitors in their shoulder pads now, and a lot of the next gen information that you're getting based on ball placement and speed and all those kinds of things is based on that GPS. That is done primarily through the league, but the team, generally speaking, has an IT type person who's in charge of kind of uploading all that. They're also in charge of uploading real-time statistics to websites and things like that. The next gen stuff is really going to continue to grow. And with the AI and everything else, I mean, at some point there will probably be, there's already an RF chip in the NFL ball. They just haven't utilized it for placement yet. They're kind of trying to figure out if that's going to be the right thing for them. They try to stay the traditional route on things until they kind of can't anymore. But all those kinds of things are really starting to take off. That's a good question because it's big.
One thing I'm curious about myself is, what could be say someone is just the statistician, like a salary or, even a spotter. Obviously, I don't want you to violate, but what are you seeing in the industry now?
Yeah, and so a play-by-play person is generally employed by the team. A color analyst is generally employed by the team. In our situation, everybody except for those two people are employed by a radio station. It's the flagship. Now, a lot of times, the team will take what they call their radio rights in-house and kind of operate it, and it'll be all team employees working. Some situations you're paid on a per game basis. When I was doing it, I was working, as a program director, it's like the full-time job, and then my weekend part-time job was doing the games. So, to do kind of the secondary level job is probably not going to be your primary source of income. But if you're a play-by-play host, certainly if you make it to the professional level, that's going to be your primary source of income. And you're probably talking, gosh, it varies pretty wildly. It varies based on the team, the league. Just looking at Nashville alone, you've got professional hockey, you've got professional soccer. The Sounds are professional baseball, albeit minor league, and every one of them needs play-by-play voice, and some of them, most of them, have color analysts as well. So it's kind of all over the board. You can make a good living with it. I've told people if you're in it for the money, it's probably the wrong industry. I'd also say that if you don't enjoy working holidays, it's probably not the right job for you. I generally wait to tell people that until they're in college, because it's just one of those things. Like, for example, we play this year on Christmas Eve. We're lucky that we're at home, because if we were the Seattle Seahawks, we'd be 1,000 miles from home on Christmas Eve and then have to fly back. So we got pretty lucky on that one. But it's something that you gotta love if you want to do it and do it well. And like I said, it's the people who really make it. They give it a little while, and when they finally make it to kind of the upper echelon, that's when kind of the bigger payment comes. Yeah. Early on, you're investing in yourself quite a bit, and you've got to, because I'll tell you right now, and it's no offense to 18-year-olds, but an NFL team, NBA team, they're not hiring an 18-year-old with no tape. They want to put somebody in that has some experience that they can, and so you've got to get that experience.
I will say this, our local radio station, Jeff and Missy Hazlip, are great about letting people come job shadow.
Yes.
And once you start job shadowing, if you're very consistent, they're going to tell you one day, why don't you get on the air and talk about this? They are so open to you all getting a little bit of experience that way, right?
Yep. And
it kind of opens the door then if I get used to it. And again, they have connections with people, right? And other radio this and that. And so, I think what Mr. Willis has said is, I think if you're in this industry too, you got to be a people person anyway, because you're going to have to network with people. You're going to have to get, oh, well, my friend Reed, and he's at so-and-so, and Reed knows so-and-so who got to so-and-so, who got to Zophar over here, right? And then all of a sudden, we've made this great connection where some tape got sent somewhere or something. But our local radio station is that owners are so receptive to you guys. So if you are interested in spending some time there, just volunteering, y'all, you're going to not get paid. Yeah, that shows them, right, how much you're really interested in it. They'll find a space for you there to start doing some stuff. They really are. So
they're a great platform.
Come see me.
They're doing games for Marshall County. They're doing games for Cornersville. They're doing games for Forest. And every one of those has a radio crew and maybe even a video crew, because they're doing stuff on the FHS network. So they're always looking for people who are interested and who want to be involved.
saw Kai Howard behind the camera Thursday night for the thing, and I'm sure he doesn't really want, Kai, he doesn't want to be behind the camera, right? He sees himself in front of the camera, but what's he got to do to start, right? He's going to be behind the camera and make, right? So I think that's what Mr. Willis is saying too, right? Hey, start somewhere and grow, and then you can, I think some of you ladies too will be outstanding at it, but you're gonna have to like get out of your comfort zone a little bit. Like I hadn't thought about going to the radio station, right? All right, hey, thank you. Don't leave yet. Just all right. If y'all want to go, you can. Do you guys want to talk to him anymore about?